death had become routine for Bruce Banner. In his universe, mortality was a revolving door. He'd walk through it screaming, and the green door would spit him back out when the sun set, angrier and greener than before. But this death felt different. The gamma reactor hadn't just exploded. It had torn, ripping through dimensions he didn't have names for. As his consciousness dissolved into the familiar darkness, Bruce reached for the green door, that sickly jade portal that always waited in the black. But when his hand touched it this time, the door burned. Not with gamma radiation, with something older, hungrier, and infinitely more malevolent. The warp had found him. Reality convulsed. The green door, that metaphysical gateway to the one below all, collided with a warp storm bleeding through the Imperium. So two hells touched. Two hungers recognized each other. And Bruce Banner was caught between them, his resurrection twisted through spaces where physics wept and sanity died. When he emerged, it wasn't on Earth. The sky above was the color of a weeks-old bruise, choked with industrial smog and the ash of burning promethium. Twisted spires of blackened metal clawed toward that poisoned sky, Gothic architecture gone cancerous with decay. The ground beneath his reforming body was scorched earth, irradiated and screaming with residual warp energy. Bruce gasped his first breath in the 41st millennium, and it tasted like death. The transformation took him immediately. His body convulsed, muscles tearing and reforming, bones cracking and expanding as gamma radiation flooded his cells. But this time, the gamma felt wrong, tainted by the warp energies that had dragged him here. Green skin erupted across his frame as he grew, 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet of rage-born muscle and fury. The Hulk rose from the crater, and the Devil Hulk's cunning mind assessed his new reality with cold precision. Vigilus. The name whispered through the warp-touched gamma in his blood. A hive world under siege, a galaxy at war. And he was something this nightmare future had never seen before. Where is this? The Hulk's voice rumbled like tectonic plates grinding, but the intelligence behind it was pure Bruce Banner. Or rather, the aspect of Bruce that had learned to think while green. Devil Hulk, the protector, the survivor. Around him, the crater stretched 50 meters wide, its edges fused to glass by the energies of his arrival. Strange symbols flickered in the irradiated soil, 8 pointed stars that hurt to look at, as if reality itself rejected them. Chaos corruption, though he didn't know the name yet. In the distance, the sounds of war echoed through the hive city's underbelly, explosions, screaming, and the distinctive crack, crack, crack of weapons he'd never heard before. Then came the lights. Dozens of them, cutting through the toxic fog. Searchlights mounted on vehicles that looked like tanks designed by someone who'd never heard of ergonomics. All brutal angles, skulls welded to armor plating, and exhaust pipes belching black smoke. The Chimera APCs of the Astra Militarum ground to a halt at the crater's edge, and 100 laser guns trained on the green giant standing in the center. The Imperial Guard had arrived, and they had no idea what they were looking at. In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself. The voice boomed through a voxcaster, distorted and harsh. A commissar stepped forward, his black greatcoat pristine despite the ash, falling like snow, a bolt pistol held steady in one hand and a chainsword in the other. His face was a mask of authority and barely controlled fear. Behind him, guardsmen in flak armor and gas masks held their weapons with the discipline of men who'd seen 1,000 horrors and expected 1,000 more. You stand on Imperial soil, mutant. Surrender or be purged. The Hulk's eyes narrowed. Mutant. He'd been called worse. But something in the commissar's tone, in the fanatical certainty radiating from every soldier, told him this wasn't like the bigotry he'd faced before. These men would kill him without hesitation, without remorse, because their doctrine demanded it. In the Imperium of man, mutation was heresy. Heresy was death. There was no trial, no mercy, no second chances. Just the Emperor's judgment delivered in last fire and bolt shells. "I don't want trouble," the Hulk growled, raising his massive hands slowly. "I'm not your enemy. There are people who need help. I can hear them screaming." And he could. Even through the industrial cacophony of the hive, his enhanced senses picked up the sounds of civilians dying in the underhive, torn apart by something with too many claws and acid for blood. Genestealer cultists, though he didn't know that name either. Not yet. The Commissar's expression didn't change. "You are a xeno-abomination or a mutant aberration. Either way, you are an affront to the Emperor's purity. Ready arms." 100 laser guns charged with a high-pitched whine, their barrels glowing with building energy. The Hulk's muscles tensed. He'd been shot before, thousands of times. Bullets, missiles, gamma cannons, the works. But something about those weapons, about the cold certainty in these soldiers' eyes, told him this was different. This galaxy didn't do warnings, it didn't do mercy, it only did war. "Last chance, big guy," the Hulk rumbled, his voice dropping to a bass growl that vibrated through the ground. "You really don't want to do this." But even as he spoke, he knew they would. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there was no room for negotiation, no space for understanding, only war, eternal and unforgiving. The Commissar raised his bolt pistol, its muzzle a black eye of judgment, and in that moment, Bruce Banner understood with horrible clarity. He hadn't been transported to another world. He'd been dragged to hell. And hell didn't negotiate. The order came sharp and absolute. Fire. Last fire erupted like a storm of red lightning, 100 beams converging on the Hulk's massive form. Each shot burned with the heat of miniature suns, scorching flesh and boiling blood. The Hulk roared, not in pain, but in fury, as the barrage hammered into him. Laser gun fire that could punch through concrete and melt steel-carved blackened wounds across his chest and arms. But even as the flesh burned, it regenerated, gamma-fueled cells knitting back together almost as fast as they were destroyed. Almost. The sheer volume of fire was staggering, a sustained assault that would have reduced a normal human to ash in seconds. "Keep firing. In the Emperor's name, bring it down." The Commissar's voice cracked through the vox, and the guardsmen obeyed with the mechanical precision of men trained to fight until death claimed them. Heavy bolters opened up from the chimeras, their 998 caliber rounds exploding against the Hulk's body with devastating force. Each bolt round was a miniature rocket, penetrating deep before detonating in a shaped explosion designed to shred ceramite armor. Against the Hulk's dense muscle and regenerating tissue, they tore crater-sized wounds that fountained green-tinged blood. The Hulk staggered, roaring his defiance. Anger flooded through him, not the mindless rage of the savage Hulk, but Devil Hulk's cold, calculating fury. These soldiers weren't evil. They were terrified, indoctrinated, and utterly convinced they were doing the Emperor's work. But that didn't mean he had to die for their ignorance. With a ground-shaking leap, the Hulk launched himself from the crater, clearing 50 meters in a single bound. He landed among the chimeras with earth-shattering force, his impact cratering the rockcrete and sending guardsmen tumbling. "I said I don't want trouble." The Hulk's fist came down on a chimera's front armor, and the tank crumpled like tinfoil, its engine block driven through its chassis. Guardsmen scrambled back, laser guns firing wildly, but the Hulk was already moving. He grabbed another chimera by its side armor and lifted, flipping the 30-ton vehicle onto its side with a shriek of tortured metal. "But if you want a monster..." His eyes blazed with gamma fire, and the radiation pouring off his body began to glow visibly in the toxic air. "I'll give you one." Then the screaming started. Not from the guardsmen, but from below, from the underhive. A tide of twisted figures erupted from the access tunnels, their bodies wrong in ways that defied description. Four-armed monstrosities with human faces stretched into insectoid nightmares. cultists bearing industrial weapons and chanting in a language that hurt to hear. Pure strain genestealers, their carapaces gleaming purple in the searchlights, moving with predatory grace. The genestealer cult had chosen this moment to attack, drawn by the psychic disturbance of the Hulk's arrival. The Imperium's nightmare had just become everyone's problem. The Commissar's bolt pistol swung from the Hulk to the cultists, his face a mask of hatred. "Xenos filth! Guardsmen, form firing lines! For the Emperor!" And just like that, the Hulk wasn't the primary threat anymore. He was just another monster in a galaxy full of them. Last fire redirected toward the cultist swarm, and the battle for Vigilus's underhive became a three-way slaughter. The Hulk stood in the center of the carnage, watching guardsmen die by the dozens as genestealers tore through their lines, and made a choice that would define his existence in this new hell. He charged into the cultists, not because he served the Imperium, not because he understood the politics of this galaxy, but because innocent people were dying in the hive above, and Bruce Banner, even as the Hulk, couldn't stand by and let that happen. His fists became green hammers of destruction, pulping genestealers with blows that shattered their alien carapaces. A pure strain leaped at him, claws extended, and he caught it mid-air, roaring as he tore the creature in half. Ichor sprayed across his chest, hissing where it touched his irradiated skin. The guardsmen stared in shock as the green giant fought with them, his raw power turning the tide of battle. The Commissar's eyes narrowed behind his cap's brim, his mind already racing with implications. This creature, this thing, was powerful beyond measure. Unkillable, perhaps, and if it could be controlled, weaponized, turned to the Imperium's purpose. The thought was heretical and pragmatic in equal measure. But in the 41st millennium, pragmatism often wore heresy's face. As the last cultist fell, torn apart by combined last fire and Hulk's fury, an eerie silence descended over the battlefield. The Hulk stood among the corpses, breathing heavily, his body already healing from dozens of wounds. The guardsmen kept their weapons trained on him, but their fingers had eased off the triggers. The Commissar stepped forward, his bolt pistol lowered but not holstered, and spoke words that would bind Bruce Banner to the Imperium's endless war. "You fight like an Imperial weapon. The question is, are you won by choice, or will you be won by force?" The Hulk met his gaze, and in that moment, Bruce Banner understood the true horror of where he'd arrived. This wasn't a world of heroes and villains. This was a galaxy where survival meant becoming the monster, where mercy was weakness, and where even immortality might not be enough to escape damnation. The green door had brought him here. The warp had tainted his resurrection, and the Imperium of Man would never, ever let him leave. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Above them, Vigilus burned, and the Hulk's war in the 41st millennium had only just begun. The holding cell was a cage designed for something far less durable than the Hulk. Adamantium bars, or whatever this galaxy's equivalent was, formed a cube barely large enough for his massive frame. Bruce had forced the transformation back, shrinking down to his human form through sheer will and exhaustion, but the guards hadn't relaxed. 20 Tempestus Scions in crimson carapace armor surrounded the cell, their hell guns trained on him with unwavering discipline. These weren't regular guardsmen. These were the Imperium's elite stormtroopers, and their eyes held the flat effect of men who'd killed things far stranger than him. Bruce sat on the cold metal floor, his torn clothing barely covering him, and tried to process what he'd seen. The battle had ended with the Commissar Hadrian, he'd learned, ordering him subdued. Not killed, subdued. That alone told Bruce something important. The Imperium saw value in him, which meant they'd try to use him. The Scions had fired some kind of neural disruptor that hadn't stopped the Hulk, but had annoyed him enough to let Bruce regain control. Now he sat in this cell deep within a facility that reeked of oil, incense, and something he couldn't identify. Fear, maybe, mixed with fanaticism. "You're awake." "Good." The voice came from beyond the bars, cold and feminine. Bruce looked up to see a woman in power armor so ornate it looked like a cathedral had been melted down and forged into a suit. Crimson and gold, covered in purity seals. Strips of parchment inscribed with prayers and bearing the symbol of a stylized eye crossed with a skull. An inquisitor. Even without knowing the term, Bruce recognized authority when he saw it. This woman could order his execution with a word, and no one would question it. She stepped closer, her face severe and ageless, in that way augmetics and juvenile treatments created. One eye was human, green and sharp. The other was a bionic implant that whirred as it focused on him, scanning through spectrums Bruce couldn't see. "I am Inquisitor Katerina Rostov of the Ordo Xenos. You are an anomaly, a biological impossibility, a potential threat to the God Emperor's Imperium." She paused, letting each word land like a verdict. "Convince me you are not Xenos filth, and you may live long enough to serve." Bruce met her gaze, keeping his voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath his skin. The Hulk never really left anymore, just waited, watching, ready to emerge. "I'm human, from Earth. I'm a scientist who was exposed to gamma radiation, and it changed me. I don't know how I got here, but I'm not your enemy." "Earth." Rostov's human eye narrowed. "Terra, you mean? The throne world, yet you speak with no imperial accent, bear no Aquila tattoos, carry no proof of citizenship. Your genetic structure," she gestured to a data slate held by a servo skull floating beside her, "reads as baseline human, yet you transform into something that withstood sustained heavy weapons fire and regenerated from wounds that should have been fatal." "Explain." Bruce took a breath. "How did you explain gamma radiation to people who thought technology was religious ritual? The energy that changed me, it's not magic, it's science. Radiation at a specific wavelength that altered my cells at a fundamental level. When I'm threatened or angry, my body transforms to protect itself. I become stronger, more durable, and I heal. Fast. Mutation." The word came out like a curse. Rostov's hand moved to the bolt pistol at her hip. "The taint of chaos, perhaps, or Xenos infiltration. Your transformation could be demonic possession. Your healing could be warp sorcery. Give me one reason I shouldn't execute you now and burn your corpse to ash." "Because I helped your soldiers." Bruce's voice hardened. "Those things that attacked. I fought them, killed them, saved Imperial lives. If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have done it already." He leaned forward, and 20 hell guns tracked the movement. "And because you're curious, you want to know what I am, how I work, whether you can use me." A thin smile crossed Rostov's face. "Perceptive. Yes, Dr. Banner, I pulled that name from the Commissar's report of your incoherent rambling during capture. I'm curious. The Imperium has faced countless Xenos horrors, demon incursions, and heretical abominations. But you register as human on every scanner, yet perform feats that rival Astartes. You emit radiation that our Geiger counters, ancient devices from the Dark Age, detect at lethal levels, yet you don't sicken and die. You are an impossibility, and impossibilities in this galaxy are either weapons or threats." She activated a hololith projector, and images flickered to life between them. Bruce's stomach turned. The first image showed a space marine. He recognized the term from Hadrian's shouted orders during the battle. A massive armored warrior, at least 8 feet tall, wielding a chainsaw that dripped blood. The second showed something that couldn't exist, a creature of pure madness, all tentacles and eyes and screaming mouths, reality warping around it. A demon. "We live in the 41st millennium," Rostov continued, her voice taking on the cadence of a teacher explaining basic truth to a child. "Humanity spans 1,000,000 worlds, but we are besieged on all sides. Xenos races seek our extinction, the forces of chaos, demons born from the warp, the realm of souls, corrupt and destroy everything they touch. Traitors within our own ranks plot our downfall, and now the galaxy itself is split in two by a warp rift so vast it has cut off half the Imperium from the light of the Astronomicon." Bruce absorbed this, his scientist's mind categorizing and analyzing despite the horror. A galaxy-spanning human empire. FTL travel through a dimension of literal hell. Aliens, demons, and civil war on a scale that made Earth's conflicts look like playground scuffles. And he'd landed in the middle of it on a world under siege. "Vigilus," he said quietly. "That's where we are. I heard the name when I arrived." "Correct. Vigilus is a strategic choke point. The only stable route between Imperium Nihilis, the dark half of the galaxy, and the Imperium Sanctus. It is under assault by Xenos, heretics, and worse. Billions defend this world because if it falls, the Imperium's supply lines collapse." Rostov's bionic eye whirred, zooming in on Bruce's face. "And into this crucible, you appear. Unkillable, powerful, uncorrupted by chaos, according to my Psyker's initial scans. You could be the Emperor's answer to our prayers, or you could be the final nail in Vigilus's coffin." "I'm not a weapon," Bruce said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. He'd always been a weapon. The military had tried to recreate the super soldier serum and created the Hulk instead. Governments had hunted him. Villains had tried to control him. And now, an interstellar fascist theocracy wanted to aim him at their enemies. "I'm a person. I have rights." Rostov laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Rights? You have the rights the God Emperor grants you, and he grants them based on your service to the Imperium. You are not a citizen. You have no documentation, no homeworld, no regiment. By law, you should be executed as a mutant or handed to the Adeptus Mechanicus for vivisection." She leaned close to the bars, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I am offering you a third option. Serve. Fight the Emperor's enemies. Prove your loyalty through blood and sacrifice. Do this, and you may earn the right to exist in this galaxy." Bruce felt the Hulk stirring, rage building at the injustice, the casual threat, the absolute certainty in this woman's voice that she owned him. But Devil Hulk's intelligence kept him in control, analyzing the situation. He was trapped, alone, in a galaxy he didn't understand, surrounded by people who would kill him without hesitation if he refused. And worse, there were people who needed help. He'd heard them dying in the Underhive, seen civilians torn apart by those cultist things. If he refused, if he let the Hulk rampage, how many innocents would die in the crossfire? "What do you want me to do?" The words tasted like ash. Rostov smiled, and it was the smile of a predator that had just secured its prey. "The Genestealer cult you encountered is merely one infestation among many. Vigilus hosts multiple cults, all preparing for the arrival of their gods. Tyrannid hive fleets that will devour this world if given the chance. You will accompany Commissar Hadrian's regiment into the Underhive. You will destroy the cult strongholds. You will kill every hybrid, every pure strain, every patriarch you encounter. And you will do this without question, without mercy, without hesitation. And if I refuse, then I will have you dropped into the Hive's plasma reactors, and we will see if your regeneration can survive molecular disintegration." Rostov's voice held no malice, no anger, just fact. "But you won't refuse, Dr. Banner, because despite everything, you are a hero. You save people, and right now, millions of people on this world need saving. The method may be brutal, but the math is simple. Help us purge the Xenos, or watch Vigilus fall and its population consumed." Bruce closed his eyes. She was right, and he hated her for it. The Hulk snarled in the back of his mind, wanting to tear through the bars, to smash this Inquisitor and every soldier in this facility. But what then? Where would he go? How would he survive in a galaxy that wanted him dead or enslaved? And those civilians... God, those screams were still echoing in his head. "I'll do it," he said quietly. "But I have conditions. No killing innocents, no executing prisoners. And if I find out you're lying to me, if this is just a slaughter, then you will do what?" Rostov interrupted. "Rampage. Destroy Imperial assets. Doom millions through your self-righteous moral posturing." She shook her head. "You are not on your Earth anymore, Dr. Banner. Here, innocence proves nothing. Here, mercy is a luxury we cannot afford. You will learn this, or you will die." "Possibly both." The cell door hissed open, and the Tempestus scions moved in with restraints, massive chains inscribed with runes that made Bruce's skin crawl. Psychic suppressors, maybe, or just really strong chains. As they locked around his wrists and ankles, Rostov turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Your gamma radiation. We've analyzed the residue from your arrival. It's tainted with warp energy. Your resurrection, your transformation, it's not purely physical anymore. The Imperium has touched you." Her bionic eye fixed on him with mechanical precision. "Every time you die and come back, you're pulling yourself through a realm where demons hunt for souls. Eventually, one of them will notice, and when they do, your immortality will become your damnation." She left, her armored boots echoing down the corridor, and Bruce sat in the silence that followed, chains weighing him down, and realized the full horror of his situation. He was immortal, unkillable, and in a galaxy where death was mercy, that might be the worst curse imaginable. The green door had always brought him back, but now it led through hell. And hell was patient. In the darkness of his cell, Bruce Banner felt the Hulk watching, waiting, and wondered which of them would break first, the man trying to hold on to his humanity, or the monster learning that in the 41st millennium, humanity itself was monstrous. Outside, Vigilus burned, and his war had only just begun. The underhive of Vigilus was a monument to humanity's capacity for misery. Bruce descended through levels of industrial decay that seemed to have no bottom, each sub-level more nightmarish than the last. The upper hive, where nobles and administrators lived in relative comfort, was a distant memory of Gothic spires and candlelit cathedrals. Here, kilometers below the surface, humanity festered in darkness so complete that the guardsman's lumens barely penetrated it. The air was thick with chemical runoff, human waste, and the sweet, sick smell of corpse starch rations gone bad. Millions lived down here, forgotten by the Imperium above, prey to gangs, mutants, and things worse than either. Commissar Hadrian led the column, his peaked cap and crimson sash somehow still pristine despite the filth. 50 guardsmen followed in tight formation, laser guns sweeping every shadow, every corroded pipe, every pile of refuse that might hide a threat. Bruce walked in the center, still in chains, flanked by 4 Tempestus scions, whose hell guns never wavered from his spine. The message was clear. He was a weapon on a leash, and if he slipped that leash, they'd put him down. Or try to. "Contact, 200 meters. The Vox operator's voice crackled through the comm beads. Thermal signatures, multiple, moving fast through the... The ambush came from above and below simultaneously. Genestealer cultists dropped from ventilation shafts, their bodies twisted mockeries of human form, extra arms ending in chitinous claws, heads elongated into eyeless nightmares, skin mottled purple and gray. They screamed in a language that was part human shriek, part insectoid clicking, and they fell on the guardsmen with the fanaticism of true believers. Last fire lit the underhive like a strobe light, red beams punching through cultist flesh, but for everyone that fell, 2 more emerged from the darkness. Bruce felt the chains snap before he consciously decided to transform. The Hulk erupted from his human frame, gamma radiation flooding his cells, bones lengthening and muscles swelling until he stood 10 feet tall in the cramped tunnel. A cultist leaped at him, forearms spread wide, and the Hulk caught it mid-air, his massive hands closing around its torso. He squeezed, and the creature popped like a grape, ichor spraying across his chest. "The monster fights with us," Hadrian's voice boomed over the vox. "All units advance for the Emperor and Vigilus." The guardsmen rallied, their training overcoming their terror, and the tunnel became a killing floor. Lars' fire and Hulk's fists worked in brutal synchronization. The guardsmen burned cultists at range, and anything that got close met green fury that shattered bones and pulped organs. But the cultists weren't the real threat. From deeper in the underhive came a presence that made Bruce's gamma-enhanced senses scream warning. Something old, something that radiated wrongness on a level that bypassed his eyes and went straight to his hindbrain. The Patriarch. The genus Stealer cult's progenitor, a pure strain Xenos that had infected this hive's population generations ago, spreading its genetic taint through reproduction until thousands carried its alien DNA. It emerged from a collapsed transit tunnel like a nightmare given flesh. 12 feet of purple carapace and corded muscle, moving on 4 legs with 2 massive arms ending in claws that could shear through ceramite. Its head was an eyeless wedge of chitin, but Bruce felt its gaze anyway, a psychic weight that pressed against his mind like a physical force. The Patriarch screamed, and the sound wasn't just noise. It was a psychic command that sent every cultist into a suicidal frenzy. Throne of Terror. Hadrian's voice lost its certainty for the first time. "That's a Patriarch, 4th generation, maybe older. All units fall back to..." "No." The Hulk's voice cut through the chaos, deep and resonant. Devil Hulk was in control now, the cunning aspect that thought while angry. "Your men fall back. I'll handle this." He didn't wait for permission. The Hulk charged, and the tunnel shook with each footfall. The Patriarch met him halfway, moving with speed that belied its size, and they collided with force that cracked the rockcrete beneath them. The Patriarch's claws raked across the Hulk's chest, cutting deep, but gamma-fueled regeneration sealed the wounds almost instantly. The Hulk's fist hammered into the creature's carapace, and chitin cracked with a sound like gunfire. They grappled, 2 apex predators testing each other's strength, and for a moment, the Patriarch's psychic assault intensified. Images flooding the Hulk's mind of consumption, of joining the hive mind, of purpose beyond individual thought. But the Hulk's mind was already a hive mind of sorts. Bruce Banner, Devil Hulk, Savage Hulk, Joe Fixit, all the personalities that shared this body pushed back against the psychic intrusion with combined will. "Get out of my head!" Each word was punctuated by a blow that drove the Patriarch back. The creature's carapace was cracking, ichor leaking from multiple wounds, but it fought with the desperation of something that had never encountered prey it couldn't dominate. Then the Patriarch made a mistake. It lunged for the Hulk's throat, claws extended, and left its center mass exposed. The Hulk's hands shot forward, grabbing the creature's head and lower jaw, and he pulled. The Patriarch's psychic scream cut off as its head separated from its body with a wet, tearing sound. The corpse collapsed, twitching, and the remaining cultists froze, their psychic connection severed, their purpose suddenly meaningless. The guardsmen executed them methodically. Last fire burned through skulls, bolt rounds exploded torsos, and within minutes the tunnel was silent, except for the drip of various fluids and the ragged breathing of exhausted soldiers. The Hulk stood over the Patriarch's corpse, breathing heavily, gamma radiation glowing, visibly around his body in the darkness. He could feel the power coursing through him, the anger still burning, wanting more violence, more destruction. Impressive. Hadrian approached cautiously, his bolt pistol holstered but his hand resting on its grip. I've seen Space Marines struggle with Patriarchs. You tore it apart like it was nothing. His eyes studied the Hulk with new assessment, not just as a weapon, but as something that might rival the Imperium's finest warriors. Perhaps Inquisitor Rostov was right about you. The Hulk forced the transformation back, shrinking down to Bruce Banner's human form. It took effort. The anger wanted to stay, the Hulk wanted to keep fighting, but Bruce had decades of practice wresting control from his other selves. He stood naked except for torn pants, covered in Xeno's blood and his own regenerated tissue, and met Hadrian's gaze. That thing, it tried to get in my head, show me images, make me join it. Genestealer psychic domination, Hadrian confirmed. They infect through genetic implantation, but they also control through the broodmind, a psychic network linking all cultists to their patriarch. Most humans who face a patriarch directly are either killed or enslaved. He paused. You resisted. That alone makes you valuable beyond measure. Bruce wanted to feel pride at that, but all he felt was exhaustion and growing horror. How many of these things are on Vigilus? Intelligence suggests at least 7 major cults, each with multiple patriarchs. The one you killed was relatively young, maybe 50 years of breeding. The older ones? Hadrian's expression darkened. The older ones have infected entire districts, tens of thousands of cultists all waiting for the signal to rise up when the Tyranid hive fleets arrive. Tyranids. Bruce had heard the term from Rostov. The aliens that eat everything. Devour, Hadrian corrected. They don't just kill. They consume all biomass, break it down, and use it to spawn more Tyranids. Entire worlds stripped to bedrock. Populations in the trillions reduced to nothing. The Genestealer cults are their advanced scouts. They infect a world, breed in secret, and when the hive fleet arrives, they sabotage defenses and offer up the population as food. He looked at the Patriarch's corpse with disgust. This is what we fight. Not for glory, not for conquest, for survival. Because if we don't purge these Xenos, they will purge us. Bruce felt sick. The math was simple and horrifying. Kill the cultists, many of whom were infected through no fault of their own, born with alien DNA. Or let the planet fall to planet-eating monsters. There was no good choice. No moral high ground. Just degrees of atrocity. The people infected. Can they be cured? Hadrian's laugh was bitter. Cured? No. The genetic taint is permanent. Even first-generation hybrids, humans with only slight mutations, carry the Xenos DNA. The Imperium's solution is simple. Identify, isolate, and execute. Entire bloodlines purged to prevent spread. He saw Bruce's expression and his voice hardened. You think it's cruel. Perhaps it is. But the alternative is extinction. The Tyranids don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. They eat. So we do what we must, no matter how brutal, because survival demands it. This was the Imperium's philosophy in microcosm. Genocide as pragmatism, cruelty as necessity, and Bruce was now part of it, his strength being used to enable it. The Hulk stirred in his mind, not with rage, but with something worse. Resignation. Even the monster understood. In this galaxy, there were no clean hands, only bloody ones and bloodier ones. There's something else, Hadrian continued, his voice dropping. When you transformed, our Auspex scanners detected a spike in warp activity. Small but present. Your gamma radiation is interacting with the Imperium in ways our tech priests don't understand. Inquisitor Rostov has ordered continuous monitoring. If you show signs of demonic corruption... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Bruce nodded slowly. The green door, his resurrection. Every time he died and came back, he was pulling himself through the warp, that dimension of literal hell Rostov had described. And something in that hell was noticing him. He could feel it sometimes, in the moments between death and resurrection, a presence vast and hungry, watching through the green door. The one below all had always been there, but now it had competition. The Chaos Gods, 4 entities of pure malevolence that fed on emotion and corrupted souls. "I'll be careful," Bruce said, knowing it was a lie. The Hulk wasn't careful. The Hulk was rage incarnate, and rage was exactly what Khorne, the Chaos God of blood and war, fed on. Every time he transformed, every time he let the anger take over, he was offering a feast to something that wanted to devour his soul. A Vox message crackled through Hadrian's comm bead, and his expression shifted from grim to alarmed. "All units, emergency ascent. Orc signatures detected on the hive's eastern perimeter. War boss level presence confirmed." He turned to Bruce. "We're moving now. The Greenskins have arrived, and if they break through the walls, this entire district is lost." Bruce felt the Hulk surge with anticipation. Orcs. He'd heard guardsmen mention them. Fungal aliens that lived for war, grew bigger the more they fought, and had technology that worked through sheer belief. And apparently, they'd just noticed Vigilus was having a war and decided to join in. Because in the 41st millennium, peace wasn't an option. There was only war, layered on war, with more war waiting in the wings. As the regiment double-timed back toward the surface, Bruce caught sight of something that made his blood run cold. Scratched into the tunnel wall, in a script that hurt to look at, was a symbol he recognized from the crater where he'd arrived. An 8-pointed star, the mark of chaos. And beneath it, words in Gothic that the guardsmen ignored, but that seemed to burn themselves into Bruce's vision. The Green God rises. Khorne watches. The Skull Throne awaits. The chaos. Gods had noticed him, and they were patient. They could wait for him to slip, to fall, to give in to the rage just once too often. And when he did, they'd be there, ready to claim him. The Hulk roared defiance in Bruce's mind, but even that defiance felt like playing into their hands, because rage was worship to Khorne. And Bruce Banner, for all his intelligence and control, was bound to a creature made of rage. He followed the regiment up through the Underhive, toward the sounds of war echoing from above, and wondered which would claim him first, the Imperium's brutality, the Tyrannid's hunger, or the Chaos God's corruption. In the grim darkness of the far future, those seemed to be the only options. And immortality meant he'd have to face all three, again and again, forever. The Orcs hit Vigilus's eastern wall like a green tidal wave of violence and enthusiasm. Bruce emerged from the Underhive access tunnels into a war zone that made the cultist ambush look like a skirmish. Thousands of greenskins, hulking, tusked brutes in scrap armor, charged across the scorched wasteland between their crude fortifications and the Hive's outer defenses. Their war cry was a guttural roar that shook the air. Wah! It wasn't just a battle cry. It was a psychic phenomenon, a collective field of belief and aggression that made their ramshackle technology work and their bodies grow larger with each fight. The Imperial defenders met them with the full fury of the Astra Militarum. Battle cannons thundered from Lehman Russ tanks, each shot vaporizing clusters of orcs in mushroom clouds of fire and shrapnel. Basilisk artillery pieces lobbed shells in high arcs that rained death across the orc horde. Heavy bolter emplacements chewed through greenskin flesh with streams of mass reactive rounds. And still they came, laughing and roaring, because orcs lived for this. War was their religion, violence their prayer, and death in battle their greatest honor. Bruce stood on the wall's rampart, still in his torn clothing, and watched the carnage with a scientist's detachment warring against a human's horror. The orcs were dying by the hundreds, but they didn't care. They enjoyed it. Every explosion that sent bodies flying was met with cheers from the survivors. Every bullet that found its mark was celebrated as a good scrap. They were insane by human standards, but in the 41st millennium's logic, their insanity was perfectly adapted to survival. There, Hadrian pointed toward the center of the orc horde, where something massive moved through the press of bodies. The war boss, Urgok the Immortal, our intelligence calls him. He survived 3 assassination attempts and a direct hit from a Death Strike missile. Killed 2 Astartes in single combat. If we don't stop him, he'll breach the wall, and 10,000 orcs will flood into the hive. Bruce's enhanced vision picked out the war boss through the smoke and chaos. Urgok was a monster, even by orc standards. At least 12 feet tall, wrapped in armor that looked like it had been welded together from tank plates and spaceship hulls. One arm ended in a massive power claw, crackling with energy fields. The other held a shooter the size of an autocannon, firing wildly into the Imperial lines with no regard for accuracy. Orcs didn't aim. They just shot a lot and believed the bullets would hit. And in the presence of a war boss's wear field, they often did. "You want me to fight that?" Bruce said. "It wasn't a question. I want you to kill it," Hadrian corrected. "The war boss is the Horde's center. Kill him, and the orcs will fragment into smaller tribes fighting each other for dominance. We can handle fragmented orcs. A unified wah will overrun us." He looked at Bruce with calculating eyes. "This is what Inquisitor Rostov meant. This is your purpose. Be the weapon the Imperium needs." The Hulk was already surging forward in Bruce's mind, eager and hungry. Orcs. Finally, an enemy he didn't have to feel guilty about fighting. They weren't infected innocents or desperate cultists. They were living weapons that existed only to fight and kill. The moral calculus was simple for once. And the Hulk wanted this. Wanted to test his strength against something that could hit back without dying in one punch. Bruce let the transformation take him. Gamma radiation flooded his cells, his body expanding, muscles swelling, skin shifting to emerald green. But this time, something was different. The anger that fueled the change felt hotter, more intense, and for a moment, Bruce could swear he heard laughter, deep, brass-toned, echoing from somewhere beyond reality. Khorne, watching, feeding on the rage. Growing stronger with every ounce of fury the Hulk channeled. The Hulk shook his head, clearing the sensation, and leaped from the wall. He covered 200 meters in a single bound, cratering the ground where he landed in the middle of the orc horde. Greenskins turned toward him, their piggy eyes widening, and then, impossibly, they started cheering. "It's a big green git," one orc bellowed, swinging a crude axe at the Hulk's head. The Hulk caught the axe mid-swing, tore it from the orc's hands, and used it to bisect 3 more greenskins in a single sweep. "But we's bigger and greener!" The surrounding orcs charged him with gleeful abandon, and the Hulk met them with equal enthusiasm. His fists became green hammers of destruction, pulping orc skulls and shattering their crude armor. An orc knob, a particularly large specimen, tried to tackle him, and the Hulk grabbed it by the legs, swung it in a circle, and used it as a club to clear a 20-foot radius. The orc horde's reaction wasn't fear. It was delight. "Dis git knows how to scrap," an orc shouted, laughing even as the Hulk's fist caved in its chest. "Best fight ever!" And that's when Urgok the Immortal noticed him. The war boss's roar cut through the battlefield like a chainsaw through flesh, and the orcs between him and the Hulk scattered, not in fear, but in anticipation. This was what they'd come for, a proper fight between 2 titans. Urgok stomped forward, each footfall shaking the ground, his power claw snapping open and closed with hydraulic hisses. "You da new git watch showed up." Urgok's voice was like gravel in a blender, but there was intelligence behind the brutality. Orcs weren't stupid despite appearances. They were cunning, tactical, and utterly dedicated to violence. "You look proper strong. Let's see if you can take a hit." The war boss charged, and the Hulk met him head-on. They collided with force that sent a shockwave rippling outward, knocking smaller orcs off their feet. Urgok's power claw clamped around the Hulk's shoulder, the energy field cutting deep, and the Hulk roared. Not in pain, but in fury. His fist hammered into Urgok's gut, denting the armor plating, and the war boss laughed. "That's what I'm talking about." Urgok headbutted the Hulk, their skulls cracking together with a sound like a bomb going off. Stars exploded in the Hulk's vision, but gamma-fueled regeneration cleared his head almost instantly. He grabbed Urgok's power claw with both hands and pulled, trying to tear the arm off. Urgok responded by firing his shooter point blank into the Hulk's chest, the heavy caliber rounds punching through muscle and cracking ribs. The Hulk's regeneration sealed the wounds even as new ones appeared. This was the kind of fight he lived for, an enemy strong enough to hurt him, durable enough to take punishment, and too stupid or too brave to run away. Devil Hulk's cunning analyzed Urgok's fighting style, looking for weaknesses, while Savage Hulk's rage fueled the strength behind each blow. They were synchronized, working together, and Urgok was starting to slow. The war boss's armor was cracking. His power claw sparked and stuttered. Blood, thick and red-black, leaked from gaps in his plating. But Urgok was laughing, a deep belly laugh that spoke of pure joy. "You the best scrap I've had in years. When I kill you, I'm gonna make a trophy out of your skull." Not happening. The Hulk's hands closed around Urgok's head, fingers digging into the gaps in his helmet, and he began to squeeze. The war boss thrashed, his power claw raking across the Hulk's back, his shooter firing wildly, but the Hulk's grip was inexorable. Urgok's helmet crumpled, his skull cracked, and with a final wet crunch, the war boss went limp. The Hulk dropped the corpse and roared his victory to the sky, and the orcs cheered. They didn't mourn their fallen leader, they celebrated the fight. Some immediately started fighting each other to determine who'd be the new war boss. Others charged the Hulk, eager to test themselves against the git who'd killed Urgok. The war was fragmenting, just as Hadrian predicted, but the orcs were having the time of their lives. The Hulk fought for another hour, a green whirlwind of destruction in a sea of greenskins. He lost count of how many he killed. Dozens, hundreds maybe. His body was a patchwork of healing wounds, his muscles burning with exertion, but the rage kept him going. And through it all, he could feel that presence watching, Khorne, the blood god, feeding on the violence, growing fat on the slaughter. Then something changed. The air itself seemed to thicken and reality tore. A warp rift opened above the battlefield, small but growing, and through it came laughter that wasn't orc or human. It was demonic. Brass-skinned horrors began to spill through. Bloodletters, demons of Khorne drawn by the sheer violence of the battle. They fell upon orcs and Imperials alike, their hell blades cutting through armor and flesh with equal ease. Chaos incursion. The Vox channels exploded with panicked reports. All units fall back to secondary lines. Call for Astartes support. But the Hulk didn't fall back. He charged the rift because something in his gamma-enhanced senses recognized it. This was like the green door, a tier between dimensions. And if demons could come through, maybe he could close it. His fist hammered into a blood letter, and the demon exploded into warp stuff, its essence dissipating. But more kept coming, and the rift was widening. Then he heard it, a voice that resonated in his bones, speaking directly into his mind. "Warrior, you please me. Your rage is pure. Your strength is worthy. Kneel, and I will make you immortal beyond even your current state. Kneel, and you will be my champion." Khorne, the blood god himself, speaking through the rift, offering power, offering purpose, offering everything the Hulk had ever wanted, an enemy worthy of his strength, a place where rage was celebrated, where violence was holy. All he had to do was kneel, accept, give in. The Hulk stood before the rift, fists clenched, gamma radiation blazing around him like a green sun. Every instinct screamed at him to accept. The rage wanted it. The Savage Hulk wanted it. Even Devil Hulk, cunning and protective, saw the logic. Better to serve Khorne than be enslaved by the Imperium. But Bruce Banner, buried deep in the Hulk's psyche, remembered something. He remembered Betty. Rick, the people he'd saved. The man he'd been before the gamma bomb. and he remembered the one below all, the entity that had granted his immortality, that waited at the bottom of everything. Two hells were fighting over him, but he didn't have to choose either. No! The Hulk's roar shook the battlefield. He leapt at the rift, not to go through, but to close it. His hands grabbed the edges of reality itself, and he pulled. Gamma radiation poured from his body. Not just energy, but will. The combined will of every personality in his fractured psyche, refusing to be claimed. The rift screamed, reality buckling under the strain, and then, with a sound like the universe taking a breath, it sealed. The blood letters still in real space howled and dissipated, their connection to the warp severed. The orcs, seeing the demons gone and their war boss dead, began to retreat, fighting among themselves, and the Hulk collapsed to his knees, exhausted in a way he'd never been before. Closing that rift had taken everything. Commissar Hadrian reached him first, his bolt pistol drawn, but not aimed. You closed a warp rift with your bare hands. That's impossible. Even Grey Knights need rituals, and... He stopped, seeing the Hulk's expression. Khorne spoke to you, didn't he? Offered you power. The Hulk nodded, forcing words through a throat raw from roaring. Said, no. Then you're either the bravest being I've ever met, or the most foolish. Hadrian holstered his weapon and offered a hand. A gesture of respect, not command. The Chaos Gods don't take rejection well. Khorne will try again and again. Until you break or die, possibly both. The Hulk took the hand and pulled himself up, then let the transformation recede. Bruce Banner stood on the battlefield, naked except for tattered pants, covered in blood and ichor, and looked at the carnage surrounding him. Thousands dead. Orcs, guardsmen, demons, all because this galaxy couldn't stop fighting long enough to breathe. And he was part of it now, a weapon in an eternal war. I know, Bruce said quietly. But I'm not kneeling, not to Khorne, not to the Imperium, not to anyone. He met Hadrian's eyes. I'll fight your enemies. I'll help protect people. But I'm not your slave, and I'm not Chaos's champion. I'm just... me. Hadrian studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Then pray to whatever god you believe in, Dr. Banner, because just you won't be enough when the real threats arrive. This was a skirmish, a footnote. The Tyranids are coming, the Chaos fleets are massing, and Vigilus is about to become the most important battlefield in the galaxy. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you said no. The galaxy has enough monsters. Maybe it needs a few heroes, even broken ones. Bruce watched him go, then looked up at Vigilus's poisoned sky. Somewhere beyond those clouds, beyond the hive's upper levels, Inquisitor Rostov was watching, analyzing, planning. And somewhere in the warp, Khorne was waiting, patient as only an eternal being could be. The blood god had time, and Bruce Banner, cursed with immortality, had nothing but time. The green door would open again, the warp would call again, and next time he might not be strong enough to refuse. 3 weeks passed in a blur of blood and brutality. Bruce fought alongside Commissar Hadrian's regiment through the Underhive's deepest levels, purging Genestila cult strongholds with methodical violence. Each transformation came easier, the line between Bruce Banner and the Hulk blurring with every battle. Devil Hulk's intelligence merged with Savage Hulk's rage, creating something new, a warrior who thought while he destroyed, who calculated while he killed. The guardsmen stopped seeing him as a monster and started seeing him as a weapon. Some even whispered prayers to the Emperor in his presence, as if his green fury was somehow holy. But Bruce felt himself slipping. Every night, when exhaustion finally forced him to sleep, he dreamed of the green door. And beyond it, waiting in that space between death and resurrection, he felt them, the Chaos Gods, circling like sharks around wounded prey. Khorne was loudest, his brass voice promising glory and endless battle. But there were others. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, whispering that Bruce's transformations were just the beginning of greater changes. Nurgle, the Plague Father, offering to end his suffering through acceptance of entropy. And Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, promising pleasures beyond rage, sensations that would make violence feel like meditation. He resisted, every time. But the cost of resistance was growing. His regeneration was slower. His transformations left him more exhausted, and the gamma radiation that sustained him was becoming more erratic, flickering with colors that shouldn't exist, purple and brass and sickly green that had nothing to do with gamma physics and everything to do with warp corruption, Inquisitor Rostov noticed. She visited him in his quarters, a bare cell in the regiment's forward operating base, furnished with only a cot and a sink. She entered without knocking, flanked by 2 servo skulls whose mechanical eyes recorded everything, and studied him with her mismatched gaze, one human eye calculating, one bionic lens whirring through spectrums. "You're deteriorating," she said without preamble. "My tech priests report that your gamma signature is becoming increasingly unstable. Warp taint is spreading through your cellular structure at a rate of 0.3% per standard day. At this rate, you have approximately 4 months before demonic possession becomes inevitable." She sat on the edge of his cot, her power armor servos hissing. "Tell me what's happening when you transform." Bruce looked at his hands. They were shaking, not with fear, but with barely suppressed rage. The Hulk was always there now, just beneath the surface, demanding release. "Every time I die and come back, I have to pass through something. A door. It's always been there, part of my resurrection. But now there are things on the other side, watching, waiting. They want me to open the door fully. Let them through." "The green door," Rostov said, surprising him. "Yes, I know of it. My predecessor encountered a similar phenomenon on Galmek, a mutant who could resurrect through a metaphysical portal. We burned him to ash with holy promethium and scattered the remains in a black hole, but not before our sanctioned psychers examined his condition." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "The door isn't gamma radiation, Dr. Banner. It's a warp phenomenon. Has been from the beginning. You're one below all. That entity you've described in your interrogations is likely a warp entity, possibly a chaos god, possibly something worse." The words hit Bruce like a physical blow. His immortality, his curse, his entire existence built on chaos. No, that couldn't be right. The gamma bomb had been science, physics, radiation interacting with his unique physiology. Not magic, not demons. "You're wrong," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Rostov activated a hololith projector, and images flickered between them. Bruce saw himself transforming, but rendered in spectrums beyond visible light. And there, clear as day, was warp energy, twisting tendrils of purple and green that wrapped around his body during transformation, feeding the change, sustaining the Hulk. "Your gamma radiation is real, but it's not the source of your power anymore. The warp is. Every time you transform, you're drawing energy from the Imperium, and every time you do that, you leave yourself open to corruption." Bruce felt sick. 20 years of being the Hulk. 20 years of dying and resurrecting, and it had all been chaos, slowly claiming him, preparing him to become what? A demon prince? A possessed monstrosity? A weapon for the dark gods? "There's a solution," Rostov continued. "Radical, but possible. The Grey Knights, the Imperium's demon hunters, have a fortress monastery called Titan, hidden in the warp. They possess technology and psychic techniques that can sever warp connections. If we can get you there, they might be able to cut your link to this green door permanently. You'd lose your immortality, possibly your transformations, but you'd be free of Chaos's influence. Or Bruce asked, because there was always an or with the Inquisition. Or we use you until you break, then execute you before you turn. You've killed 7 patriarchs, 3 orc war bosses, and closed a chaos rift with your bare hands. You're the most effective weapon Vigilus has. From a purely tactical standpoint, your life matters less than the lives you can save before you fall. Rostov's expression was neutral, but Bruce heard the calculation in her voice. She'd already run the numbers, already decided which option served the Imperium better. Before Bruce could respond, alarms shrieked through the base. Red emergency lumens bathed the corridors, and the Vox channels exploded with panicked traffic. Contact, multiple biomass signatures breaching the hive's northern perimeter. Throne of terror, they're everywhere. Fall back, they're in the walls. Rostov was on her feet instantly, her bolt pistol drawn. The Tyranids, they've arrived. She looked at Bruce, and for the first time, he saw something like sympathy in her human eye. Make your choice quickly, Dr. Banner. If the Hive Fleet takes Vigilus, none of us will live long enough for your corruption to matter. Bruce followed her into the corridor, where guardsmen were scrambling to defensive positions. Through the base's viewports, he could see the horizon, and his blood ran cold. The sky was moving. What he'd thought were clouds were actually living organisms. Gargoyles, flying Tyranid creatures the size of cars, descending in swarms of thousands. And on the ground, a living tide of chitin and claws and teeth was flowing toward the hive. Hormagaunts, termagants, Tyranid warriors, carnifexes, living tanks of bioengineered destruction, and behind them, towering over the swarm like mobile cathedrals of flesh, came the truly massive organisms. Hierophants, hierodules, bio-titans that made the orcs' war machines look like toys. They moved with terrible purpose, and Bruce's enhanced senses could feel the psychic pressure they exerted. The hive mind, a consciousness composed of trillions of organisms, all thinking as one, all focused on a single goal. Consume. This is it. Hadrian's voice came over the Vox, steady despite the apocalypse bearing down on them. All units to the walls. Fix bayonets. Say your prayers. For the Emperor and for Vigilus, we hold the line or die trying. Bruce felt the Hulk surging forward, eager and ready. But for the first time, he hesitated. If he transformed now, if he drew on the warp's power to fuel his rage, would that be the final step? Would Khorne finally claim him? Or worse, would the hive mind sense him, recognize him as a powerful biomass source, and focus the entire swarm on capturing him for consumption and repurposing? Rostov seemed to read his thoughts. Whatever you're going to do it now, because in approximately 3 minutes, those creatures will breach the outer wall, and 10 million Tyranids will flood into this hive. Your existential crisis can wait. Survival cannot. She was right. Bruce took a deep breath, feeling the anger building, the transformation coming whether he wanted it or not. The Hulk was part of him. Warp-tainted or not, cursed or not, it was what he was. And right now, millions of people needed a monster on their side. Get your people to safety, Bruce said, his voice already deepening as his body began to change. I'll buy you time. How much time? Rostov asked. Bruce's bones cracked and lengthened, his muscles swelling, green skin erupting across his frame. The Hulk emerged fully, 10 feet of gamma-fueled fury, and his eyes blazed with power that was part science, part warp, and entirely rage. As much as you need. He leaped from the wall, clearing the defensive perimeter in a single bound, and landed in no man's land between the Imperial lines and the Tyranid swarm. Alone. One being against a living tide of alien hunger. The Tyranids saw him and screamed. Not with voices, but with psychic pressure that would have driven a normal human insane. The hive mind recognized him as a threat and redirected the swarm's advance. Thousands of organisms changed course, flowing toward the lone green figure with the single-minded purpose of elimination. The Hulk roared back, and his voice carried across the battlefield, a challenge, a defiance, a declaration that he would not kneel, not to chaos, not to the hive mind, not to anything. He was the Hulk, immortal, unstoppable. And if this was where his story ended, if the Tyranids consumed him and the warp claimed what was left, then he'd go down fighting. The swarm hit him like a tsunami of claws and teeth. Hormagaunts leaped, their scything talons aimed at his throat. Termagants fired living ammunition, flesh-bore beetles that burrowed into his skin. A Tyranid warrior, 8 feet of bioengineered killing machine, thrust a bonesword at his chest. The Hulk caught the blade, shattered it with a squeeze, and drove his fist through the warrior's carapace, pulping its organs. But for every Tyranid he killed, 10 more took its place. They climbed over their own dead, using corpses as ladders to reach him. They attacked from every angle, coordinated by the hive mind with perfect tactical precision. And the Hulk fought with everything he had: fists, feet, teeth, raw gamma radiation burning through alien flesh. He was a green star of destruction in a sea of purple chitin, and he was losing. The Carnifex charged him, 4 tons of armored muscle and crushing claws. The Hulk met it head-on, grappling with the Bio-Titan, his feet digging trenches in the ground as it pushed him back. His hands found purchase on its carapace, and he lifted, muscles screaming with effort, and threw the Carnifex into a cluster of Hormagaunts, crushing dozens. But the effort cost him. His regeneration was slowing. The wounds were accumulating faster than he could heal, and through it all, he could feel the warp calling, offering power, offering strength, offering everything he needed to win if he'd just opened the door. No, not yet. Not while he still had strength. Not while people still needed him. The Hulk fought on, and behind him, the Imperium rallied. Artillery opened up, shells screaming over his head to explode in the Tyranid swarm. Leman Rust tanks advanced, battle cannons roaring, and from the sky came salvation. Drop pods slamming into the battlefield with earth-shaking force, and from them emerged giants in power armor. Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes, the Emperor's Angels of Death. They were Ultramarines, their blue armor pristine despite the carnage, and they fought with a precision and fury that made the guardsmen look like children playing soldier. Bolter fire tore through Tyranid swarms. Chainswords carved through chitin, and at their head, a captain in ornate armor wielding a power sword that crackled with energy, his voice booming through Vox speakers. For the Emperor and Guilliman, push them back. The Hulk found himself fighting alongside demigods, and for a moment, just a moment, he felt hope. Maybe they could win this. Maybe Vigilus would survive. Maybe he wouldn't have to damn himself to save everyone. Then the sky tore open. Not a warp rift this time, but something worse. A shadow that blotted out the sun, so massive it defied comprehension. A hive ship descending through Vigilus's atmosphere, its body kilometers long, covered in spore chimneys and weapon symbiotes. And from its underbelly, more Tyranids rained down, millions of them, a biblical plague of alien hunger. The Ultramarine captain saw it, and his voice lost its certainty for the first time. Throne. That's a hive ship. If it lands, Vigilus is lost. We need orbital support, exterminatus protocols, something. The Hulk looked up at the descending nightmare and made his choice. The green door opened in his mind, not fully, not enough to let the chaos gods through, but enough to draw on power he'd been holding back. Gamma radiation exploded from his body, visible now as a green aurora that lit the battlefield. He grew, 11 feet, 12 feet, muscles swelling beyond anything he'd achieved before. This was Worldbreaker Hulk, the aspect that had shattered planets, and he leaped. The jump carried him a mile into the air, straight toward the hive ship's descending bulk. Tyranid flying organisms tried to intercept him, but he swatted them aside like insects. His fist, blazing with gamma fire and warp energy, drove into the hive ship's underbelly with force that sent shockwaves rippling through its massive body. The ship screamed, a psychic wail that echoed across the planet. And the Hulk held on, punching again and again, tearing through layers of bio-armor, burrowing into the living vessel's flesh. He could feel the hive mind focusing on him now, all its attention, all its hatred, trying to overwhelm his psyche with sheer psychic weight. But the Hulk's mind was already broken, already fragmented. The hive mind couldn't dominate what was already chaos. Bruce, Devil Hulk, Savage Hulk, Joe Fixit, all the personalities screamed defiance together, and their combined will held. Inside the hive ship, surrounded by digestive acids and defensive organisms, the Hulk found what he was looking for, a massive organ that pulsed with bioelectric energy. The ship's heart, or brain, or whatever kept this nightmare alive. His fist, still blazing with power, drove into it with every ounce of strength he had left. The hive ship convulsed. Its descent became a fall, and as it plummeted toward the wasteland outside Vigilus, the Hulk rode it down, laughing with manic triumph because he'd done it. He'd killed a hive ship with his bare hands, and the Chaos Gods could go to hell. The impact was apocalyptic. The hive ship cratered into the ground with force that registered on seismographs across the planet. The shockwave flattened Tyranids for kilometers, and from the wreckage, the Hulk emerged, shrinking back down to Bruce Banner's human form, covered in alien ichor, barely conscious, but alive. The Tyranid swarm, deprived of its command ship, fragmented into confusion. The Ultramarines and Imperial Guard pressed the advantage, driving the aliens back, reclaiming ground. Vigilus had survived, for now. Inquisitor Rostov found Bruce in the wreckage, barely breathing, his body struggling to regenerate from the catastrophic damage. She knelt beside him, and for once, her expression was something other than calculating. "You saved 10 million lives today," she said quietly. "Maybe more. The Imperium owes you a debt." Bruce coughed, tasting blood. "Then, pay it. Get me to Titan. Cut me loose from the warp, before I can't say no anymore." Rostov nodded. "I'll arrange transport. But Banner, what you did today, drawing that much power." The Chaos Gods noticed. "All 4 of them. They'll be coming for you harder now. Are you sure you can hold out until we reach Titan?" Bruce closed his eyes, feeling the green door pulsing in his mind, feeling Khorne's laughter, Tzeentch's whispers, Nurgle's offers, Slanesh's promises. "No," he admitted, "but I have to try, because if I fall, if I become their champion, I'll be worse than any hive fleet." Above them, Vigilus's wounded sky began to clear, and for the first time since he'd arrived in this nightmare future, Bruce Banner saw stars. Cold, distant, uncaring, but stars nonetheless. And somewhere among them was Titan. Salvation or damnation, only time would tell which. The journey to Titan took 3 months, and every day was a battle against corruption. Inquisitor Rostov commandeered a modified strike cruiser, the Unrelenting Purity, equipped with Gellar fields strong enough to protect a small fleet. The ship's interior was a cathedral of steel and stone, every surface inscribed with wards and prayers, every corridor patrolled by battle sisters of the Order of Our Martyred Lady. These women were the Adepta Sororitas, the Emperor's most faithful warriors, and they watched Bruce with eyes that promised swift execution at the first sign of heresy. Bruce was confined to a sanctified cell in the ship's core, surrounded by psychic dampeners and holy icons. The Gellar fields kept the warp at bay during transit, but they couldn't stop the voices in his head. Khorne's brass laughter, Tzeentch's riddles, Nurgle's gentle promises of peace through decay, Slanesh's whispered offers of pleasure beyond pain. They were always there now, a constant psychic pressure that made sleep impossible and sanity a daily struggle. Devil Hulk helped. The cunning personality had always been the most resistant to outside influence, and he constructed mental barriers, imagining walls of gamma radiation, doors sealed with rage, fortresses built from Bruce's scientific knowledge. But even Devil Hulk was wearing thin. The Chaos Gods were patient, and they had eternity to work with. Commissar Hadrian visited when he could, bringing reports from Vigilis. The planet still stood, but barely. The Tyrannid invasion had been blunted, not defeated. Hive Fleet Leviathan's tendrils still probed the world's defenses, and new threats emerged daily. Orc waves drawn by the fighting, chaos cultists emboldened by the carnage, and whispers of Necrons awakening in Vigilis's deep deserts. The Imperium was bleeding from 1,000 cuts, and Bruce's absence was felt. The guardsmen called him the Green Angel, a title that made him sick because angels didn't rage, didn't kill with their bare hands, didn't struggle daily against damnation. "They're writing songs about you," Hadrian said during one visit, sitting across from Bruce in the cell. The commissar looked older, his face lined with exhaustion. "The Battle Sisters don't approve, of course. They say only the Emperor deserves worship. But the common soldiers, they saw you fight a hive ship alone. They need something to believe in beyond duty and death." "I'm not a hero," Bruce said quietly. His hands were shaking again, and he clenched them into fists to hide it. "I'm a monster trying not to become a worse monster. Tell them to pray to their emperor, not to me." "The emperor is distant," Hadrian replied. "A corpse on a golden throne, kept alive by the sacrifice of 1,000 psychers daily. He cannot answer prayers anymore, if he ever could. But you bled for them, killed for them, saved them. That's tangible. That's real." He leaned forward. "I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's human. We need heroes, Banner, even broken ones. Especially broken ones because they understand what it costs." Before Bruce could respond, the ship shuddered. Alarms blared, and the red emergency lumens bathed the cell in crimson light. Hadrian was on his feet instantly, his bolt pistol drawn. "What?" "Geller field fluctuation." The Vox crackled with the ship's master of etheric engineering. "We're experiencing a warp incursion on decks 7 through 12. Daemons manifesting. All hands to combat stations." The Chaos Gods had made their move. They'd waited until the unrelenting purity was deep in the warp, far from any help, and then struck. The Geller fields, the only thing keeping the ship's interior in real space, were failing. And when they collapsed completely, the demons would flood in, and everyone aboard would die or worse. Bruce felt the Hulk surging forward, but he held back. Transforming now, drawing on warp power while surrounded by demons would be like opening a door and inviting them in. But if he didn't transform, the ship would fall, and thousands would die. Damned if he did, damned if he didn't. "Get to the Geller generators," Bruce told Hadrian. "I'll buy you time." "You'll die," Hadrian said flatly. "Demons don't just kill, they corrupt, possess. Damn, if you face them as a human, then I die human," Bruce interrupted. "Better than becoming their puppet." He stood, feeling his body already beginning to change despite his resistance. The Hulk wanted out, needed out. The rage was building to critical levels. "Go, now, before I can't control this anymore." Hadrian hesitated, then nodded and ran. Bruce waited until the commissar was gone, then let the transformation take him. But this time, he tried something different. Instead of drawing power from the warp, he focused inward on the gamma radiation that was his original source. Pure physics, pure science, the energy that had created him before chaos noticed. It was like trying to light a candle in a hurricane. The warp pressed in from all sides, offering power, offering strength, and his own gamma reserves were depleted from months of fighting. But Bruce had always been stubborn. He forced the transformation to complete on gamma alone. and the Hulk emerged, smaller than usual, only 8 feet tall, his green skin flickering with unstable energy. This was Savage Hulk, the original, running on fumes and willpower. The cell door exploded inward, and demons poured through. Blood letters, Khorne's foot soldiers, brass-skinned horrors with hellblades that burned with warp fire. Pink horrors, Tzeentch's cackling monstrosities that split into blue horrors when killed. Plague-bearers, Nurgle's rotting servants, their touch spreading disease and despair. And demonettes, Slaaneish's twisted seducers, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. The Hulk met them with fists and fury. A bloodletter's hell blade cut deep into his shoulder, and the wound didn't heal. Warp weapons bypassed regeneration, leaving scars that burned with demonic energy. But the Hulk didn't stop. He grabbed the bloodletter by its skull and crushed it, the demon exploding into warp stuff with a shriek of frustrated rage. "Khorne sees you, warrior," the dying demon hissed. "You cannot resist forever. Your rage is his. Your violence is worship." Hulk doesn't worship. Each word was punctuated by a blow that shattered another demon, but they kept coming, and the Hulk was slowing. The wounds were accumulating, his gamma reserves were depleting, and the voices in his head were screaming, offering power, offering healing, offering victory if he'd just accept. A demonette slithered close, its voice honey-sweet despite its monstrous form. "Why suffer, beautiful one? Slaanesh offers pleasure beyond pain, ecstasy beyond rage. Open yourself to sensation, and you will never hurt again." The Hulk's fist obliterated it, but the words lingered. How long had he been in pain? How many years of rage and suffering and dying and resurrecting? The demonette was right. He could end it. Just let go. Just accept. Just stop fighting. No. Bruce's consciousness, buried deep in the Hulk's psyche, refused. He'd spent 20 years fighting for control. He wouldn't give up now, not to chaos, not to anyone. The Hulk roared and charged deeper into the ship, toward the Geller generators. The corridors were hell, battle sisters fighting back to back against demon hordes, guardsmen dying as plague-bearers touched them and their flesh rotted from their bones, tech priests desperately trying to maintain the failing wards. And through it all, the Hulk smashed forward, a green battering ram of defiance. He reached the generator deck to find Commissar Hadrian and a squad of battle sisters, holding the line against a demon prince. A once human champion of chaos, elevated to demonhood, towering 15 feet tall with wings of brass and a sword that wept blood. It was a creature of pure Khorne, and it radiated such malevolence that the guardsmen around it were paralyzed with terror. "There you are," the demon prince rumbled, its voice like grinding metal. "The green warrior who denied the blood god. Khorne sends his regards." It raised its blade. "Kneel or die, those are your only options." The Hulk's response was a leap that carried him across the deck, his fist aimed at the demon prince's skull. They collided mid-air, and the impact sent shockwaves through the ship's superstructure. The demon prince's blade carved a trench across the Hulk's chest, cutting deep enough to expose ribs. The Hulk's fist shattered one of the demon's horns, ichor spraying. They fell to the deck together, grappling, and the Hulk realized with growing horror that he was losing. The demon prince was stronger, faster, immortal in a way that even the Hulk's regeneration couldn't match. And every wound the demon inflicted burned with warp fire, preventing healing, accumulating damage. "You fight well," the demon prince admitted, its blade pressing toward the Hulk's throat. "But you are mortal, flawed, weak. Khorne could make you strong, eternal, perfect. Why do you refuse?" The Hulk's answer was to bite down on the demon's sword arm, his teeth tearing through brass flesh, and use the moment of surprise to reverse their positions. He straddled the demon prince and began pounding its face with both fists, each blow driven by decades of rage and pain and suffering. "Hulk, not weapon!" Each word was a hammer blow, "Hulk, not slave. Hulk is Hulk." The demon prince laughed, even as its face crumbled under the assault. "Yes, this is what Khorne wants. Rage, violence, blood. You worship him, even as you deny him." And in that moment, Bruce understood the trap. Every time he fought, every time he killed, every time he let the rage take control, he was feeding Khorne. The blood god didn't need worship. He fed on violence itself, and Bruce, in trying to resist, had been serving chaos all along. The realization nearly broke him, so the Hulk's fists slowed, the rage faltered, and the demon prince, sensing weakness, reversed their positions again, its blade rising for the killing blow. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Not brass, not honeyed, not diseased or mad. Human, female, powerful. In the name of the God Emperor, I banish thee. Inquisitor Rostov stood at the entrance to the generator deck, flanked by two figures in silver armor, so bright it hurt to look at. Grey Knights. The demon hunters had arrived. Their force weapons, swords inscribed with the Emperor's true name, blazed with psychic fire that made the demons shriek and recoil. The demon prince turned toward this new threat, and in that moment of distraction, the Hulk acted. Not with rage, not with violence, with science. He grabbed the demon's wings, calculated the stress points in the brass-like structure, and pulled with precise force. The wings tore free, and the demon prince howled. The Grey Knights struck as one, their force weapons driving into the demon's chest, and it exploded into warp stuff, banished back to the realm of chaos. The remaining demons, leaderless, began to dissipate as the Geller field stabilized. The battle sisters and guardsmen collapsed in exhaustion, many wounded, some dying, but alive. The Hulk shrank back to Bruce Banner, his body a mass of burns and cuts that refused to heal. He collapsed to his knees, and one of the Grey Knights approached, a warrior whose helmet bore the symbol of a captain. The Grey Knight studied him with eyes that had seen horrors beyond comprehension. "You resisted," the Grey Knight said, his voice resonant with psychic power. "Even wounded, even offered power, you resisted. That is rare." He extended a gauntleted hand. "I am Captain Arvan Stern of the Grey Knights. Inquisitor Rostov requested our aid in your situation. Come, Titan awaits, and we will see if you can be saved." Bruce took the hand and let himself be pulled up. "And if I can't be saved?" Stern's expression was hidden behind his helmet, but his tone was matter-of-fact. "Then we will grant you the Emperor's mercy, a swift death and cremation in holy fire. It is more than most demon-touched receive." Bruce nodded. It was honest, at least. More honest than anything else in this galaxy. "Then let's find out." The unrelenting purity limped toward Titan, its Geller fields reinforced by the Grey Knight's presence, and Bruce Banner sat in his cell, surrounded by demon hunters, and wondered if salvation was even possible, or if he'd been damned the moment the gamma bomb went off, 20 years and a galaxy ago. The green door pulsed in his mind, and beyond it, the Chaos Gods waited. Patient, eternal, certain. Titan was a moon that shouldn't exist. Hidden in the warp itself, phasing in and out of real space through technology and psychic power that predated the Imperium, it was the Grey Knight's fortress monastery, a bastion of purity in an ocean of corruption. As the unrelenting purity approached, Bruce saw it through the observation port. A gray sphere wreathed in silver lightning, covered in Gothic architecture that seemed to grow organically from the moon's surface. Massive cathedrals, training grounds the size of continents, libraries containing forbidden knowledge that would drive normal humans insane. This was where the Imperium's demon hunters were forged. The landing was controlled chaos. Battle sisters formed a corridor of bolters and flamers, ready to immolate Bruce at the first sign of corruption. Grey Knights in Terminator armor, massive suits that made them look like walking tanks, stood at intervals, their psychic presence so intense that Bruce's head throbbed just being near them. And at the center of it all stood a figure that radiated authority like a physical force. Grand Master Voldus, the supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knight's Third Brotherhood, a warrior who had banished demon princes, closed warp rifts, and stood against the Primarch Demon Magnus the Red himself. He was a giant, even by Space Marine standards, his armor inscribed with so many wards and prayers that it seemed to shimmer with holy light. His force, halberd, a weapon that could cut through reality itself, rested across his shoulders, and his eyes studied Bruce with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Dr. Bruce Banner, Voldus's voice resonated through his helmet's Vox grill, deep and measured. Inquisitor Rostov has presented your case. A man cursed with immortality through a warp phenomenon. A warrior who has resisted chaos despite constant exposure. A weapon the Imperium needs, but cannot trust. He descended the landing ramp, each footfall heavy with ceramite and purpose. You have come seeking salvation, but first you must prove you are worth saving. Bruce, flanked by Captain Stern and 2 other Grey Knights, met Voldus's gaze. What kind of proof? The trial of the broken door, Voldus replied. You claim your resurrection passes through a metaphysical portal, this green door. We will force you to die, then observe what happens when you resurrect. Our librarians will monitor the warp fluctuations. If your door is merely a warp phenomenon, we can sever it. If it is something worse, he let the sentence hang. If it's worse, you'll kill me permanently, Bruce finished. How? There are ways, Voldus said simply. The Grey Knights have ended immortals before. We know rituals that can trap souls, weapons that can sever connections to the warp, and in extremis, we can call upon the Emperor's own power through our chapter's most sacred relics. He paused. But I do not believe it will come to that. Inquisitor Rostov speaks highly of your resistance. Captain Stern witnessed your refusal of a demon prince's offer. You have strength, Dr. Banner. We will see if it is enough. They led him deep into Titan's core, through corridors lined with the names of fallen Grey Knights. Thousands upon thousands, each one a hero who had died fighting demons, their sacrifice remembered in silver script. The weight of their legacy pressed down on Bruce. These were humanity's finest, genetically enhanced super soldiers, psychically empowered and trained from childhood, and even they died by the thousands. What chance did he have? The Chamber of Trials was a massive spherical room, its walls inscribed with wards so dense they overlapped into abstract patterns. At the center was a raised platform surrounded by psychic amplifiers, crystalline structures that hummed with power. A dozen Grey Knights librarians stood in a circle around the platform, their psychic hoods crackling with energy. This was where they would kill him, and watch what happened next. Remove your clothing, Voldus instructed. We must observe your body during transformation and resurrection without obstruction. Bruce complied, standing naked on the platform, feeling more vulnerable than he had in years. The Hulk stirred in his mind, sensing danger, but Bruce pushed him down. Not yet. Let them do this. Let them see. Captain Stern approached with a force sword drawn. I will make it quick, he said, and there was something like respect in his tone. You have fought well, Dr. Banner. Whatever happens next, know that you faced chaos with courage. The Emperor protects. The Emperor protects, Bruce echoed, not sure if he believed it, but hoping nonetheless. The Force sword drove through his heart with surgical precision. Psychic energy burned through his nervous system, ensuring instant death. Bruce's last thought before darkness took him was a prayer, not to the Emperor, not to any god, but to Betty Ross, dead 20 years and a galaxy away. I tried. I'm sorry it wasn't enough. Then he was falling through the green door. It was worse this time. The space between death and resurrection had always been dark, but now it was crowded. Bruce could feel presences pressing in from all sides. The Chaos Guards, yes, but also something else. Something older. Something that had been waiting at the bottom of reality since before the universe began. The one below all. It manifested as a twisted reflection of the Hulk. Green skin rotting, muscles atrophied, eyes empty voids. It spoke with Bruce's voice, but wrong, like a recording played backward. "You cannot escape me. I am your beginning and your end. I gave you immortality. I gave you power, and I will take it back when I choose." "You're not real," Bruce said, his consciousness floating in the void. "You're just entropy, the heat death of the universe, a metaphor. I am as real as your rage," the one below all replied. "As real as your guilt, as real as your fear. I am the void that waits for all things, and you, Bruce Banner, are my prophet." The Chaos Gods manifested then, their presences overwhelming. Khorne, a mountain of brass and blood. Tzeentch, a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. Nurgle, a garden of decay. Slaanesh, beauty and horror intertwined. They surrounded the one below all, and for a moment, Bruce felt the cosmic tension, two types of damnation competing for his soul. "This one is ours," Khorne's voice boomed. "His rage feeds us, his violence is worship." "No," the one below all responded, and its voice carried weight that made even the Chaos Gods pause. "He is mine. He has always been mine. You are parasites, feeding on what I created." They were going to fight over him, cosmic entities arguing over possession like dogs over a bone. And Bruce, caught in the middle, realized something. They were both wrong. He wasn't a weapon, wasn't a prophet, wasn't anyone's possession. He was Bruce Banner, and he was done being claimed. With an effort that felt like moving a mountain, Bruce turned away from both the one below all and the Chaos Gods. He focused on the green door itself, not as an entrance, but as a structure, and he began to analyze it with a scientist's mind. What was it made of? How did it function? Could it be understood? The door was warp energy, yes, but structured in ways that shouldn't be possible. Mathematical patterns that predated human understanding. Geometric forms that existed in dimensions beyond the standard four. It was technology and magic and physics all at once, and Bruce's gamma-enhanced mind, pushed beyond normal limits by desperation, began to comprehend it. "It's a stabilized warp rift," he whispered to himself, "anchored to my unique physiology. The gamma radiation acts as a catalyst, but the door itself it's a wound in reality, and wounds can be cauterized." "You cannot close what I have opened," the one below all said, but there was uncertainty in its voice now. "Watch me," Bruce replied. In the Chamber of Trials, the Grey Knight's librarians watched in awe as Bruce's corpse began to resurrect, but differently than before. Usually the gamma radiation would flood his body, healing damage, rebuilding tissue. This time, the energy was being redirected. Bruce's consciousness, operating from within the space between death and life, was using his own resurrection as a weapon against the door itself. Psychic energy poured from his body in waves that made the wards flare. The librarians chanted in unison, adding their power to Bruce's effort, stabilizing reality around him. And slowly, impossibly, the green door began to close. The Chaos Guards raged, their voices shaking the warp. The one below all screamed, a sound of pure entropy that threatened to unmake Bruce entirely. But the Grey Knights held firm, their faith and psychic might creating a barrier between Bruce and damnation. And Bruce, drawing on every ounce of willpower he'd accumulated over 20 years of fighting the Hulk, pulled the door shut. It closed with a sound like the universe taking a breath. And Bruce Banner opened his eyes on the platform, alive, healed, but changed. He could feel it immediately. The connection to the warp was severed. The voices were gone. The Chaos God's presence had vanished, and the one below all was sealed away, locked behind a door that no longer opened. But the cost was immediate and terrible. Without the warp connection, his gamma radiation was purely physical again, and it was fading. His body, no longer sustained by metaphysical energy, began to age rapidly. 20 years of arrested aging caught up in seconds. Lines appeared on his face, gray streaked through his hair, his muscles lost their enhanced tone. What? What did I do? Bruce gasped, feeling mortality return like a weight settling on his shoulders. Grandmaster Voldus approached, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. You severed your connection to the warp. Permanently. The green door is closed, Dr. Banner. You are free of Chaos's influence. He paused. But you are also free of your immortality and your transformations. The Hulk are now running on finite energy. Our librarians estimate you have perhaps a dozen transformations left before your gamma reserves are exhausted completely. After that, you will be human, mortal, normal. Bruce looked at his hands, older hands, scarred hands, but his hands, not the Hulk's, not anyone else's. For the first time in 20 years, he was truly alone in his own mind. The other personalities, Devil Hulk, Savage Hulk, Joe Fixit, were gone, their existence dependent on the warp connection. It was just Bruce now. One man, finite, dying. And he laughed. It started as a chuckle and built into full-throated laughter that echoed through the chamber of trials. The Grey Knights tensed, hands on weapons, but Bruce wasn't corrupted. He was free. I'm going to die, he said, still laughing through tears. Actually die. Permanently. No resurrection, no green door, no coming back. He looked at Voldus. That's the best news I've heard in 20 years. Captain Stern removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face that had seen centuries of war. Most men fear death, Dr. Banner. You celebrate it. Why? Because it means I'm human again, Bruce replied, wiping his eyes. I've been a monster for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be mortal, to have stakes, to know that my choices matter because I won't get infinite chances to make them. He stood, feeling his body protest, muscles sore, joints aching, all the sensations of normal human frailty. It was wonderful. How long do I have? Without transforming? Our apothecaries estimate 20 to 30 years, Voldus said. Assuming you do not transform, each transformation will consume more gamma radiation, shortening your lifespan. Use all 12, and you will have perhaps a year remaining. Then I'll use them carefully, Bruce said. Save them for when they're needed most. Inquisitor Rostov entered the chamber, flanked by Commissar Hadrian. She studied Bruce with her mismatched eyes, and for the first time, he saw approval in her expression. You did what I thought impossible, Dr. Banner. You severed a warp connection through will alone. The Ordo Malleus will study this for centuries. She approached, but the question remains, what will you do now? You are no longer immortal, no longer infinitely useful. The Imperium has little need for mortal men, no matter how extraordinary. Bruce considered. He could ask for transport back to Vigilis, resume fighting alongside Hadrian's regiment, use his remaining transformations to save lives until his gamma reserves ran dry, then die in battle like the guardsmen he'd fought beside. Or he could do something else. Something the Imperium wouldn't understand. I want to go to the Underhives, Bruce said. Not to fight, to help. I'm a scientist, a doctor. I can treat radiation sickness, chemical exposure, genetic damage, all the things the Imperium ignores because it's too busy fighting wars. Let me use my knowledge while I still can. Let me save people, not just kill for them. Hadrian's expression shifted to confusion. That's not how the Imperium works, Banner. We don't waste resources on the Underhive. Those people are expendable, replaceable. Then the Imperium is wrong, Bruce said flatly. Every person matters, Every life has value. I've killed enough. Let me save some before I die." Voldus was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The Grey Knights exist to fight demons, but we also exist to preserve humanity. If your choice is to serve through healing rather than violence, I will not stop you." He looked at Rostov. "Inquisitor, I recommend Dr. Banner be released into the custody of the Adeptus Mechanicus Biologus Division. His knowledge of radiation and genetic manipulation could prove invaluable." Rostov's expression was calculating, but she nodded. "Agreed. But Banner, understand this. The moment you become a liability, the moment your gamma radiation destabilizes, or you show signs of corruption, I will personally ensure your termination. The Imperium's mercy extends only as far as its needs." "I understand," Bruce said. And he did. This was the Imperium, brutal, pragmatic, unforgiving. But within that brutality, there were cracks where compassion could grow. Small acts of kindness, individual choices to help rather than harm. He couldn't change the Imperium, but he could change his corner of it. Captain Stern approached and offered his hand, a gesture of respect between warriors. "You fought well, Dr. Banner. Few mortals face chaos and walk away uncorrupted. Fewer still choose mercy over vengeance. Walk with the Emperor's light, whatever path you choose." Bruce shook the offered hand, feeling the strength in the Grey Knight's grip. "Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance." As he was led from the Chamber of Trials, Bruce looked back one last time at the platform where he'd died and been reborn for the last time. The green door was closed, the Chaos Guards were distant, the one below all was sealed away. He was mortal, finite, and free. And for Bruce Banner, that was enough. 5 years passed. Bruce Banner, now visibly in his 50s with gray-streaked hair and deep lines etched by exhaustion and purpose, worked in the bowels of Hive Primus on Vigilis. The Adeptus Mechanicus had assigned him to a Medici facility in sub-level 47, deep enough that the nobility forgot it existed, but high enough that the worst horrors of the Underhive didn't reach it. Here, he treated the forgotten. Workers exposed to toxic runoff from the Hive's manufactorums, children born with mutations from chemical exposure, veterans suffering from radiation poisoning after fighting near plasma reactors. The Imperium called them expendable. Bruce called them patients. His laboratory was a cluttered maze of equipment, some Imperial, some jury-rigged from scavenged parts, all meticulously maintained. He'd published 17 papers on radiation treatment, 12 on genetic stabilization, and 8 on treating warp exposure trauma without resorting to execution. The Adeptus Mechanicus Biologus found his work fascinating, but heretical. He treated mutation as a medical condition rather than corruption, which flew in the face of Imperial doctrine. But Inquisitor Rostov, true to her word, protected him. His results were undeniable. Survival rates in his ward were 340% higher than the Hive average. He'd transformed only 3 times in 5 years. Once to stop a Genestealer cult uprising that threatened to breach sub-level 50. Once to collapse a tunnel when orcs tried to dig into the Underhive. Once to pull a collapsed manufactorum off trapped workers when no servitors were available. Each transformation left him weaker, his gamma reserves depleting, his body aging faster. The Hulk, when he emerged, was smaller now, barely 7 feet tall, his strength diminished but still superhuman. 9 transformations remained, 9 chances to be the monster. Then mortality. Bruce was fine with that. He was treating a young girl, maybe 8 years old. Her name was Mira, for severe chemical burns when Commissar Hadrian found him. The Commissar looked older too, his face a roadmap of scars, his uniform bearing commendations from a dozen campaigns. But his eyes were tired, the kind of tired that came from seeing too much death. "Banner," Hadrian said, watching as Bruce carefully applied regenerative paste to Mira's burns. The girl whimpered, and Bruce hummed softly. An old lullaby Betty used to sing, a lifetime ago. I need to speak with you, privately. Bruce finished bandaging Mira's arm, gave her a ration bar from his personal supply, and sent her back to her family. Then he turned to Hadrian, already knowing this wasn't a social visit. What's happened? Abaddon the Despoiler has launched his 13th Black Crusade, Hadrian said without preamble. Cadia has fallen. The Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, has torn the galaxy in half. Half the Imperium is cut off from Terra, drowning in warp storms. Vigilus is now a strategic choke point, and every faction in the galaxy wants it. He pulled out a data slate showing tactical maps. Chaos fleets are massing, the Tyranids are closing in, Orcs are consolidating for the biggest whirl in centuries, and the Necrons have awakened in force. Bruce studied the maps, his scientific mind automatically analyzing force distributions, supply lines, defensive positions. You're losing. We're dying, Hadrian corrected. Lord Commander Guilliman himself has sent reinforcements. Entire chapters of Space Marines, Titan Legions, Imperial Navy battle groups. But it's not enough. Vigilus is going to become the biggest battlefield since the Horus Heresy. Millions will die. Billions, maybe. He looked at Bruce with desperate eyes. I'm not here on official orders. I'm here as a friend. If you have any transformations left, we need the Hulk. One last time. Bruce was silent for a long moment, looking around his laboratory. At the patients sleeping in recovery beds, at the children he'd saved from mutation-induced death, at the 5 years of work he'd done, proving that the Imperium's cruelty wasn't inevitable, that compassion was possible even in this nightmare future. I have 9 transformations left, Bruce said quietly. 9 chances to be the monster, and you want me to spend them on a war that can't be won. I want you to save lives, Hadrian replied. Same as you've been doing here, just on a larger scale. 1 Hulk transformation could collapse a chaos ritual site, could stop a Tyranid swarm, could buy time for evacuations. You've spent 5 years saving people one at a time. Help me save them by the 1,000. And when my gamma runs out? Bruce asked. When I'm just a mortal man again, what happens to my patients? Who treats them? Hadrian had no answer. Because they both knew the truth. The Imperium wouldn't replace Bruce, wouldn't send another doctor to sub-level 47. The people here would go back to dying in silence, forgotten and expendable. But if Bruce didn't help, if he hoarded his remaining transformations, millions would die in the coming war. Soldiers, civilians, children like Mira, caught in crossfires they didn't understand. It was an impossible choice. Save the few he could reach, or save the many he couldn't. Be a doctor or be a weapon. Live the life he'd built, or die the death the galaxy demanded. Bruce closed his eyes and thought of Betty, of Rick Jones, of all the people he'd failed to save in his old life. And he thought of the people here, the workers, the children, the forgotten, who depended on him. I'll help, he said finally, but on my terms. I choose when to transform, I choose which battles matter, and when my gamma runs out, you get me back here. Let me die doing what I love, not what the Imperium needs. Hadrian nodded, relief evident in his expression. Agreed. Thank you, Banner. You're saving more lives than you know. Or ending more than I should, Bruce replied. But that's always been the problem, hasn't it? The war for Vigilus was hell, magnified beyond comprehension. Bruce stood on the walls of Hive Primus and watched as the sky itself burned. Chaos fleets engaged Imperial Navy vessels in orbital battles that turned night into day. Tyranid bioships descended in swarms that blotted out the sun. Orc rocks, hollowed-out asteroids filled with green skins, crashed into the planet's surface like meteors, each impact releasing thousands of warriors, and from the deserts, Necron monoliths rose, ancient machines of death awakening after millions of years of sleep. The Imperium's response was equally apocalyptic. Titan legions, god machines hundreds of feet tall, strode across battlefields, their weapons leveling city blocks. Space Marine chapters fought with precision and fury that made the Astra Militarum look like children, and the Imperial Guard died by the millions, their bodies forming walls of corpses that the enemy had to climb over. Bruce used his first transformation to stop a chaos ritual. A sorcerer of Sinch was attempting to summon a greater demon in the heart of Hive Primus, using 10,000 sacrifices to fuel the summoning. The Hulk smashed through the ritual circle, his fists pulping cultists, his rage disrupting the warp energies. The sorcerer tried to bind him with spells, but Bruce had learned he transformed on Gamma alone now, no warp connection to exploit. The sorcerer died screaming, and the ritual collapsed. 10,000 lives saved. 8 transformations remaining. The second transformation came when a tyrannid Trigon, a massive burrowing organism, breached the hive's lower levels, threatening to let the swarm flood into the civilian sectors. The Hulk met it in the tunnels, grappling with the beast in darkness, his fists hammering into its armored carapace until it collapsed. He sealed the tunnel with rubble, buying time for evacuations. 50,000 lives saved, 7 transformations remaining. The third was against an Orc Stomper, a massive war machine piloted by a war boss who'd unified 3 tribes. The Hulk climbed the Stomper like a mountain, tore open its cockpit, and threw the war boss into the machine's power core. The resulting explosion took out half the Orc horde. 100,000 lives saved. 6 transformations remaining. Each transformation left Bruce weaker. His hair went completely gray. His body, once enhanced by gamma radiation, became frail. He developed a persistent cough, his lungs damaged by repeated exposure to his own transformations. The Adeptus Mechanicus Medici gave him 6 months to live, maybe less. But he kept fighting. The 4th transformation was to save Commissar Hadrian. A Chaos champion, a warrior who'd fought for 10,000 years, had cornered Hadrian's regiment, and the Hulk arrived just in time. The battle was brutal, the champion wielding a demon weapon that carved chunks from the Hulk's flesh. But Bruce won, barely, and Hadrian lived. 5 transformations remaining. The 5th was to collapse a Necron tomb, complex before it could fully awaken. The Hulk burrowed into the tomb, smashing stasis chambers, destroying reanimation protocols. The Necrons activated their self-destruct, and the Hulk barely escaped before the tomb vaporized in a blast of antimatter. 200,000 lives saved. 4 transformations remaining. The 6th was to hold a bridge against a tyrannid swarm while civilians evacuated across it. The Hulk stood alone for 6 hours, his fists never stopping, his body covered in so many wounds he looked like hamburger. When the last civilian crossed, he collapsed the bridge and let himself be buried in rubble. It took 3 days for the guardsmen to dig him out. 500,000 lives saved, 3 transformations remaining. By the time Bruce used his 7th transformation, stopping a Chaos Titan from breaching the Hive's main gate, he was dying. The gamma radiation was almost gone. His body was shutting down, organs failing one by one. The Adeptus Mechanicus offered to convert him into a servitor, preserve his brain in a mechanical body. He refused. He wanted to die human. Inquisitor Rostov visited him in the Medicae ward where he'd once worked. His patients, the ones who'd survived the war, gathered around his bed. Mira, the girl with chemical burns, now a young teenager, held his hand. "You saved millions," Rostov said. "The Imperium will remember your service." "The Imperium won't remember anything," Bruce replied, his voice weak. "In 100 years, I'll be a footnote, a statistic. That's fine. I didn't do it for glory." He looked at Mira. "I did it because every life matters. even in a galaxy that says otherwise. 2 transformations remain, Rostov noted. Will you use them? Bruce shook his head. I'm done being the Hulk. Let someone else be the monster. I'm going to die as Bruce Banner, just the man. That's enough. Hadrian arrived, his uniform torn, his face exhausted. The war's turning. Guilliman's forces are pushing back the Chaos fleets. The Tyranids are retreating. The Orcs are fragmenting. Vigilus will survive. Because of you. Because of everyone, Bruce corrected. I just pushed a little harder than most. He died 3 days later, surrounded by the people he'd saved. No transformation, no resurrection, no green door. Just a man taking his last breath and finding peace. The Imperium buried him with honors in the Garden of Heroes on Vigilus. His grave was simple. Dr. Bruce Banner. Scientist, healer, warrior. He chose compassion in a galaxy of cruelty. And in the warp, the Chaos Gods raged because they'd lost him. The one below. All screamed because the green door remained closed, and Bruce Banner's soul, free at last, slipped into whatever afterlife awaited. No longer cursed, no longer broken, just free. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.